I'm definitely much more comfortable writing fiction. I feel much more at home writing fiction, and that's probably because of the freedom you have to make stuff up. And I'm generally working with either things either that happened to me or that I heard about happening to people in my family or strangers or things I've read about or whatever it might be, but there's usually some kind of element of fact underlying it in some way or another. But the great thing is that you don't have to stick to that. And in fact, the extent to which you do feel compelled to stick to the facts can be really crippling. So like in The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay, when I decided that all the World War II theaters of battle had been heavily covered in fiction and there weren't any theaters left, that I would have to find a new one. And I went and looked into Antarctica, and I discovered that there had been this Navy presence in Antarctica up through 1941, but then after that there wasn't another again until after World War II. And my first reaction was like, oh darn it, I can't do that now because it didn't happen. And then I suddenly remembered that I was making it up. So if I said there was a theater of war in Antarctica in World War II, then there was, and I just needed to buttress all that with things that sounded plausible. But that's such an exhilarating place to be at when you kind of kick loose finally of what actually happened. Or a lot of the times I can't really remember what really happened. I just remember a version of what happened, and I leave a lot out. And when it comes to nonfiction, I do feel a certain amount of compulsion to tell the truth.
Certain amount.
To a certain degree. I try not to get carried away, but that can feel really very imprisoning, and like you're trying to set up a good joke and you need three, it has to happen 3 times, but it actually only happened twice, and you're so tempted to say that it happened 3 times, then you can't. So it's I find it more frustrating and more confining, but on the other hand, sometimes there are little pieces of life, of stories that really happen, things that with my family history or whatever it might be, that just probably won't ever really work their way into anything. And so a lot of times nonfiction feels like I'm probably not going to write about how my kids and I are obsessed with Doctor Who in a novel. But I could deal with that subject and with the idea of a family's obsessions in the form of a short piece.
I actually have the opposite feeling. It makes me feel really anxious writing fiction. I think because I can't, there's some kind of head girl instinct in me, and I want to be right. And in fiction, you can never be right. And even worse than that, for me, I never know what it is I want to write in fiction. I don't know what would be best. Whereas when I'm writing nonfiction, I feel like the facts are such a fantastic anchor, and that I'm in control. I think probably that's the bottom line. But I certainly think when you're in the middle of a novel and enjoying a novel, there's no greater feeling. That's such a sensation when it's going well. Mm-hmm. But for everyday kind of cheeriness, I'd much rather write nonfiction, to be honest.